Tonight, stern words for developed countries as Pacific deals with climate change. Follow-up biodiversity conservation conference planned for next year. A midday fire razes home and shop. Very good evening. Those stories are coming up in this bulletin, but first, tonight, Nelson Mandela, the revered former South African president and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, passed away yesterday. Mandela was 95 years old. Current South African President Jacob Zuma announced yesterday afternoon that the country's greatest son was gone.
Fellow South Africans, our beloved Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, the founding president of our democratic nation, has departed. He passed on peacefully in the company of his family around 2050 on the 5th of December 2013. He is now resting. He is now at peace.
Public eye in recent years as he battled several bouts of illness. During South Africa's apartheid era, Mandela spent 27 years in prison before emerging as his country's new democratic leader. And we'll have more on Mandela's passing in our World News segment. Prime Minister Commodore Porenge Bainimarama this afternoon did not mince his words as he closed the 9th Pacific Islands Conference on Nature Conservation and Protected Areas. He called on developed nations to think of smaller Pacific states now severely affected by climate change, citing example of Kiribati and Tuvalu. The PM also assuring the region that Fiji will not turn its back on its neighbours when it comes to possible relocation.
Playing the central part and once again claiming its primary position in the fight against climate change. But how far can Fiji play the role of the good neighbor to its regional partners when real issues affect us right here on our doorsteps?
So Fiji is facing a range of unprecedented and perplexing decisions as we contemplate giving them refuge against the rising sea. We clearly cannot have another sovereign nation within our borders.
Commodore Bainimarama reiterated that Fiji is facing a real dilemma of playing friendly host to one of its neighbors. The government of Kiribati has bought a significant piece of land, 6,000 acres on Vanuatu to be exact. It's more of an insurance policy against the threat imposed by climate change and rising sea level.
So what do? Are these people prepared to become Fijians? Can they be dual nationals of Kiribati and Fiji? How will the whole thing work? These are just some of the aspects we are having to consider as the climate change crisis escalates.
The Prime Minister did not spare the top 10 carbon emitters in the world either, and questioned whether their concerns were really genuine.
China, the United States, the European Union, India, Russia, Japan, Germany, Canada, Iran, and the United Kingdom. They are our friends, but they need to treat us all collectively in a more responsible manner and deal with this crisis. We certainly expect them to shoulder the financial impact that we suffer as Pacific Islanders.
The Prime Minister made reference to the 2013 Constitution, which says that every person has a right to a clean and healthy environment. Apisalome Rambo, Fiji One News.
The 9th Conference on Nature and Biodiversity Conservation has come up with 10 key outcomes. These range from ecosystem-based adaptation to capacity development and private sector engagement. Let us start with the details.
The 10 key actions have been developed following a high-level meeting of governments, private sector and civil society organizations held yesterday. The major outcomes focus on ecosystem-based adaptation, ensuring food security for people, taking into account of fisheries as well as invasive alien species.
These actions are proposed as the 10 overriding key actions that must be undertaken by Pacific Island countries and territories and partners if we are to deliver our conservation commitments by 2020.
Sharing of information for decision-making, capacity development and enforcement of conservation efforts have been prioritized. There should also be arrangements for financing conservation projects.
Once adopted, they will form an integral part of the action strategy for nature conservation in the Pacific region for the next 5 years and beyond.
Proposals have also been put forward to engage more from the private sector and encourage green economies as the major outcomes.
The idea is that we now need to implement it. That's critical. Generally, most people know what is the problem. The issue is how do you actually address it? How do you stop, for example, environmental degradation? How do you provide incentives for people not to dump their waste into the sea, so you kill the reefs? What do we do? I mean, for example, to mitigate the impact of climate change.
These key outcomes will be the guideline for the region to ensure all efforts are streamlined towards nature conservation. Haliteshdat, Fiji One News.
When Vodafone launched its fourth generation network on Wednesday, high internet speed was anticipated for a good portion of the population. However, it's been revealed today that accessing the 4G network may just take a little while longer. Ravai Vafo explains. Apologize, we'll get to that story in a few minutes. But the ending of the high-level conference doesn't mean that all ends there. Fiji will host another conservation conference next year to follow up on the implementation of these key outcomes by regional countries.
As the 9th Conference on Nature and Biodiversity Conservation draws to an end, the implementation of key outcomes for Pacific Island countries now begins. To follow up on the implementation bit of the outcomes, a high-level conservation meeting will be convened again before April next year.
We propose that this gathering be where we will seek firm commitments from individuals, organizations and governments about how they plan to action the outcomes of this conference before they sign the 2014-2020 action strategy.
Syed Qayyum says many times the outcomes of such important conferences are just left in black and white with no or very little implementation. The reconvening will also urge Pacific Island countries to work towards these outcomes.
Fiji will ensure that the emphasis is placed firmly on action. We're not interested in simply making grand pronouncements that are not achievable or are never implemented.
The Environment Minister adds the meeting next year will form an agreement amongst regional countries on nature conservation.
For example, engage in unmitigated, for example, mining. So these are some of the issues that we need to resolve and have a firm commitment as a region. And that's what Fiji's offered. Let's get back together again. Let's not go away after this and come back 5 years later and say, oh, scratch our heads and say nothing's been done.
The conference will adopt an inclusive approach to climate change and nature conservation. Haliteshdat, Fiji One News.
Now back to the 4G story. When Vodafone launched its fourth generation network on Wednesday, high internet speed was anticipated for a good portion of the population. However, it's been revealed today that accessing the 4G network may just take a little while longer. Ravai Vafo explains.
In order to have access to Vodafone's 4G service, the main criteria, one has to have a phone that is 4G compatible. For now, only a few of Vodafone's smartphones can have access to the fastest mobile network available on the market. The cheapest handset that can access the 4G network costs anywhere between $600 to $700. Something retailers may need to relook at, especially after the Prime Minister's budget and announcement of reducing the cost of smartphones, something that he repeated at the 4G launch this week. However, Vodafone is adamant and proud of what they are able to offer the country.
Unfortunately, 4G is a fairly new concept, and when it's a novelty in the market, it's normally priced high. Over a period, the prices will certainly come down as manufacturers of handsets, etc., achieve economies of scale in terms of 4G handsets. But for now, I think we've priced the handset reasonably.
Mr. Prasad adds that in due time, everyone can enjoy what 4G has to offer.
When something comes into the market, it's a novelty, and there are few people. It's a luxury item. It's like a status symbol. Some people want to show that They are the first on 4G. So, during that early period, obviously the prices are slightly higher. But, over a period of time, as I said, when there's economies of scale, the prices do come down.
However, Prasad defends that 3G is sufficient enough to cater for the greater public.
The vast majority of the people, they still have got data coverage in terms of 3G, and that is sufficient speeds for them to actually utilize the service, because as you go more rural, there are even less subscribers. So the issue of congestion, etc., is not there, and people should still have a fairly good experience.
Also, with a great number of iPhone users in the country, 4G is still not available to them. However, Prasad insists that this will change soon.
The iPhones are 4G compatible, 4G capable, but whether they will work on our network now, no. But what we are doing is we are already working with the Vodafone New Zealand and Apple to try and make sure that Apple actually does a firmware patch which could be put on iPhones for people who have iPhones in Fiji, and then they should be able to use that.
On the other hand, Digicel Fiji is taking another approach when they will enter the 4G market next year. According to Digicel's commercial director Andrew Skelton, they are keen on making 4G devices more affordable for the general public. At the end of the day, the choice will lie with consumers on how fast they want their internet data speed to be, and if they can afford it. Reviver for all, Fiji One News.
There has been another structural fire, this time in Nandi. These pictures were captured by Fiji television employee Anish Chand at around midday today. The fire gutted this 5-bedroom home, which also had a shop adjoined to it. This was in Nawe Dhomba in Nandi. National Fire Authority firefighters arrived at the scene shortly after the emergency call was made to find the shop fully engulfed in flames. Investigations into the cause of the fire is now underway as the NFA calls on all building owners and homeowners to be mindful of fire safety by doing simple things such as switching off power points or electrical appliances when not in use. Ahead in the news, USP prepares for surge in student numbers. And more reminiscing at CWM Hospital's 90th birthday. Hello again. The interest generated by the 16 days of activism against gender violence has encouraged those behind the initiative. According to one of the founders of the initiative, Shamima Ali, this initiative is not just a local idea but also a global one. Abisalome Rombo has more.
I'm a founder of the 16 Days of Activism, 1991 at Rutgers University. So we have all these days. The 25th is of significance. It's a national day, International Day for the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women.
Proving that these matters are close to her heart. According to Shamima Ali, the response to the 16 Days of Activism campaign has been good, in particular in rural communities.
We're having workshops all over the country on request, Vanua Levu, Viti Levu, and so on.
The patriarchal setup of most of our communities pose a real challenge. So when rural communities' response is encouraging, it indicates that people are coming on board.
Because for villages to hold these marches, they have to get the permission of the male leaders, and the male leaders are giving this permission and also participating. So that has been pretty good. The other good thing is that other organizations are taking up the issue also and doing things, in their own way and so on.
Other organizations are taking up gender violence issues as well, assisting the center in their own ways.
For us, we're quite happy with this 16 days because it's quite widespread and many people are coming on board. This is when the campaign against violence against women and girls intensifies during these 16 days and culminates on World Human Rights Day, which is 10th of December.
Shamima Ali says there's still a need to encourage women to speak out about personal issues they face daily. Abisalome Rambo, Fiji One News.
The traditional kingmakers of the Nandrunga province have revealed that the position of Turangana Levu, the paramount chief of the province, will remain vacant for some time. This follows the passing of the Turangana Levu, Ratu Sakiusa Makutu, who was laid to rest yesterday. The Tokatokana Kurwarua, the traditional kingmakers in the Nandrunga province, say they will make an appointment once the 100 nights mourning period is lifted.
For the Vanua Funa Kurubarua, it does not mean that if a paramount chief passes away, that we will select his son or an elder brother or anything of that sort. We will sit as a family and will discuss who will be the best candidate for the position.
Yes, the Tokatokana Kurubarua will meet soon to decide a name, but that will only happen once it's time for a new kalewu to be installed.
For now, we will be observing a mourning period of 100 nights. Following this, if the elders in the Tokatokana Kurubarua are burdened in their heart to select a new leader, then the process will start.
Local universities are now looking at ways to accommodate the anticipated increase in student numbers next year. With government offering quite a few incentives to encourage higher education, the tertiary institutions know they will have to cater for the increased numbers somehow. And one of the strategies the University of the South Pacific will implement is to schedule Saturday classes.
The main reason is simply that we've run out of teaching space, or we're running out very quickly of teaching space, and with the increase in student numbers predicted for next year, it would be very difficult to timetable everything.
Over the years, the university has had to schedule classes in the evenings, but says Saturday classes will not have too much of an impact on students' workload. The regional institution also has plans to upgrade its infrastructure.
I don't think it will have too much of an impact on them, and in fact it should make it better, because I think we'll be able to timetable less late evening slots.
Throughout the week, various activities had been organized to mark the Colonial War Memorial Hospital's 90th anniversary, and there's been a lot of reflection on years gone by. But now it's all about addressing challenges and providing the best medical services to the general public. Drebukelang reports.
Staff of the country's largest hospital, the Colonial War Memorial Hospital, were in celebration mode today. It was time to walk down memory lane, revisiting the historical importance of the hospital and how it has nurtured some familiar names in the health sector.
It is like a Jerusalem for health professionals. It is a fact that many health professionals had been nurtured or groomed at CWM Hospital. It has been a conducive setting for some families. A sizable portion has gone on to become prominent health practitioners and public administrators in Fiji, the region, and the world, and it continues to do so with renewed strength.
Chief guest Dr. Josefa Koribueta, who has spent most of his career at the CWM Hospital, says it has grown from strength to strength in terms of the service provided.
The availability of well-trained Fijian health professionals and the acquisition of state-of-the-art medical equipment, combined with effective partnerships with healthcare providers, have ensured that a high standard of service are provided in the hospital to the members of the public in Fiji and also within the region.
Koribueta also urged those in charge of running the hospital to work closely with those from the corporate sector, as they always willing to assist in terms of major upgrading works.
Being the main tertiary healthcare referral hospital for the nation, special clinical services expanded and continue to do so, and with it our great acknowledgement to the donations from individuals, donor organizations, as well as the government of Fiji. In a generation where philanthropy support is increasing, we must recognize the efforts put in by the corporate organization.
The CWM Hospital anniversary will end next Friday. Drebukelang, Fiji One News.
The Social Democratic Liberal Party already has a strategy in place for next year's general elections. Expressions of interest have been advertised. They now have a plan in place to tackle the single constituency and the voting system that will determine the 50 seats in Parliament.
The Social Democratic and Liberal Party is already in planning mode for the 2014 general election. They are aware that this new voting system requires a lot of work for political parties who want majority seats in Parliament.
Well, for us, one constituency really doesn't work on the ground. Trying to make people go out and stick a vote out of 50 in the ballot paper and telling them that they represent one constituency, it would be pretty difficult to find traction on the ground for that.
While they're still sorting out possible candidates, they already have a fair idea of how exactly they will approach election.
So what we're really trying to do is divide up the country into 50 sub-constituencies, which is 50 seats that are required in parliament. So we're cutting up the country into smaller units. In that way, we can then reach out to our supporters, and it's pretty easy for them to be instructed on what to do during polling day.
So Delpa has also revealed some of its candidates who will contest next year's polls.
I'm excited. I hope I can be chosen. I cannot say because I'm putting in my application just like other people, and which will be decided by the selection committee of the party. So yes, I have to find my voters.
There will be no rest for party executive this festive season, as they will continue planning and finalizing their 2014 election strategy. Nrebukelangi, Fiji One News.
Meanwhile, SODELPA will announce the name of their new leader in January. General Secretary Pio Tambaiwalu confirmed they will advertise the post in order to get the best candidate. He says this has been done for transparency's sake and also to attract the best possible candidate.
Behind us, the advertising for the post again is to give opportunity. Once again, the democratic principle of allowing people to vie for the post, for the leadership post. So no one comes around and said, "Why won't we give them the opportunity to vie for party leadership?" So that is why we also advertised for that position.
And there's interest in the post already. 4 applicants indicated their interest in heading the party in next year's general elections.
We're looking at about January. There's been a short list of names given to the selection committee. They're working on it. We also once again advertised for the party leader position in the hope that we'll get more to vie for that.
The latest news from around the Pacific is up next. Stay with us. Cook Islands Prime Minister Henry Puna says the declaration of a marine park would reinforce and enhance its people's desire to be clean and go green. Puna made these comments during the final day of the 9th Conference on Nature and Biodiversity Conservation. Works on declaring Cook Islands half of the exclusive economic zone as a marine park is nearing completion. The Cook Islands government has also included traditional leaders in this conservation effort.
It is to address the concerns of our environmentally conscious people, that because there are huge riches on our ocean floor, we at least have a framework in place to ensure that any exploration and exploitation of those resources will be done in an environmentally friendly and responsible manner.
Puna says the Cook Islands have not only concentrated on conserving biodiversity, but have a whole host of other environmental issues included as well.
That is something that I think is coming across very clearly at this conference too, that right throughout the Pacific there is this consciousness about the environment and an agreement or a consensus that we must all work together to preserve our environment.
Now remember, you can also view the Fiji One News Bulletin on our website. That's www.fijione.tv. You can also watch previous news bulletins as well as our current affairs, business and sports shows. Curtis next with sports, and Sukuna Bowl delivers another memorable clash.
That's right, Billy. We've got all the heated action coming up after the break. But also ahead, Army outbox police to retain title. And swimming's 7-year plan to be mapped tomorrow.